Bain Company. So typically McKinsey follows a three-step procedure. First is they have a resume shortlist. It's a very rigorous shortlist. They usually shortlist just 10% of the people who have applied for the job offer. And so basically, from what I know from discussion with people in McKinsey whom I had as seniors, they look at three general things. One is they look at strong leadership profile. Second is they look at someone who is intellectually very strong. The third thing that McKinsey looks for, which is very unique when compared to the other firms, is they look for someone with a good entrepreneurial background. So based on these things is usually the resume shortlist. What may happen is sometimes they may shortlist you based on just one of these in case they feel that someone is extremely strong on one of these parameters and the other two can be neglected. Otherwise, they look for a good balance of all three. So I can discuss that later. The second part, which is the problem solving test. So that happens typically a week before your interviews. So McKinsey again is unique in the fact that they conduct a problem solving test. It's an aptitude kind combined with consulting kind of a test, and this happens globally wherever you apply in McKinsey for all positions. So what happens is that it is a 26 question 1 hour test, and basically it has 3 case studies. Usually, most of the time it is 3 case studies, and so each case study is something like a passage. It's a huge passage which with a lot of data, and you have to come up with answers to the questions that follow. And so typically this with the help of this, they don't usually it's eliminate you. It's more of a building a profile kind of a thing, so that they can understand which parts you are strong in and which parts you are weak. So combined from these two, I can say that first they take. So what happens is first they prepare an interview. So just to give a idea of the process, first they prepare a resume shortlist of say 30 people. Then they have a test on the basis of which they will not neglect any of they will not eliminate any of these 30 people. But what they'll do is they'll have individual profiles for each of these 30 guys, which they can use in the interview process. My first interview in McKinsey started off with a very generic question, which is, tell me something about yourself. And while I was telling that out loud, the interviewer usually looks at your profile, which he has some 3 or 4 pages of document prepared on the basis of your PhD. And based on that, he, decided to give me a quick guesstimate. And generally, just to, mention this because I felt this very strongly, that all the McKinsey interviewers were very, very, helpful and very warm in general. So in fact, when I came there, he saw that I had already had 3 or 4 interviews earlier with some other firms. So he said that I won't waste much of your time. You can relax. We'll just do one quick guesstimate, and so then you can move on. He didn't even really ask me to solve it. He just wanted the factors which I would consider. So the question was that there is an XYZ multinational, telecom company, and they are they want to know what will be the 4G market size in 2019. So this is, I believe, the typical kind of cases that McKinsey does, and so he wanted to know, in order to calculate the market size, what are the factors that I would consider to come down at a smaller number. So I, when I used to prepare, I had a very generic approach of solving all the guesstimates, and I used to list down all the factors which will limit down or constrain my problem, and then decide an order of priority so that I can come to a good answer. So similarly, I proceeded by listing down some of the factors. The first would be probably accessibility to 4G. Some rural areas may not have networks, so 4G being there is even more difficult. Second would be affordability, depending on the rates that they would charge. Third would be probably even a want to use 4G. People are comfortable with 3G, so that way the numbers will be reduced. So I used to come up with a list of 4 or 5 factors. Here I don't think gender would matter, age would matter. So depending on factors like this, I used to come up with a list of 4 or 5 factors, and I used to see if these are good enough. Similarly, I jotted down these 3 or 4 factors. Then the procedure that I follow is usually find the factor which is, if you remove that, the others become irrelevant. So for example, if someone doesn't want to use 4G in the first place, then having 4G, having the money to afford 4G, nothing matters. So coming down by that approach, you need to first find out how many people want to use 4G. So he has to cut it down by a factor of say 60 or 40 based on some logical explanation. I don't really recall now. Now based on those subset, then I would apply the next criteria, which would be the next subset. Say for example, if you cannot afford 4G, suppose there is no accessibility of 4G, then even if you can afford it, does not make sense. Because no matter what, even if you want, there is no availability, you cannot. Next would probably come to say their age, because that age would probably use it. And last factor probably that I would apply is affordability. And in case there are multiple factors. So doing that kind of an approach, I came to a final answer. He seemed pretty, okay with it. And he asked me to, just tell me some brief incidents about my, he asked me what else have you done on campus other than something which is there on your resume. So I mentioned him about an election that I was a part of some 2 years back. And then he wanted to actually strike a conversation. So he, started speaking about his experiences, and the interview ended on a very light note, very cracked a joke. And so he asked me to move into the next room where I had the next round. Okay, so the second round that I had, the second interview that I had as a part of the first round were also very similar to the first one. Again, the partner who interviewed me was very friendly. He introduced me, he asked the same question, what do I do on campus? And then he introduced that he himself was from IIT a long time back. And so he gave me a very unique case. He wanted to know how many people in India actually, visit theaters. So not the film theaters, the normal drama theaters in India. And he wanted to find the market size for that. So again, using the same approach, I use 4 or 5 factors. One would be, say, age here. Probably people of our age don't watch theatre so much. Second would be, again, a cultural, some people who are enthusiastic for drama. Most other people nowadays don't, if there's a film available, they don't go ahead with drama. Third is accessibility. We don't really have many good theatres in, India, and where, you can watch live, third bell kind of a place. And so there were one or two other factors which I used on, and again using the similar approach. Even if you don't have a need, then nothing else matters. So coming down to a need factor based on, say, in this case I combined age along with it. So probably breaking down age intervals, I somehow came to the conclusion that usually people of our age who watch theatre would be only people who are participating in drama, things like that, which would be, say, 2% or something like that of the total college population who would actually go to theatre. This was based on my own experience. I used to consider a class of 100 in my own division, and I used to think how many of them have actually gone to a theatre, knowing them really well, and that used to come out to be around 3 or 4. So I used to say 2% would be a good enough estimate. And as long as the partner seemed comfortable, I moved ahead. Then, based on this age kind of a thing, I came down to a need. Then next was affordability, because theatre are usually more expensive. So next was accessibility. Yeah, so based on accessibility, because even if you're living in a rural area, you can't really go to a theatre, something like Prithvi. So earlier in the case question, actually mentioned that he wants theatres like Prithvi kind of a theatre. So again, people in rural areas are all eliminated, came down to an even finer number. Then he wanted me to look at, who else would want to go. So there was a small portion of, people who are working in the industry who go there to, look for fresh talent. So counting those numbers and taking few more parameters, I came to a, final conclusion. And so he, once I did this, he also wanted me to go via a different approach. This was more of a, a demand kind of an approach. Then he wanted me to, triangulate it with the help of the other approach, seeing how many plays does India have in the first place, and then see if, even if they're performing at this rate, what would be a good number. So that was a very quick and dirty kind of an estimate, and it came to roughly something more than that. So I said that probably I would have underestimated and came to a mid-average kind of figure. So again, actually the interviews was just 30 minutes. So this interview got shut in between due to lack of time, and then I had to move on to the next round. So after this, I went on to some other firms where I had my interviews. Then I got a call back from McKinsey that they liked me in my first round, so they called me back for the second round interview. Here again, I had just one interview. It was again surprisingly a guesstimate, and so in this case, they didn't ask me anything about tell me about yourself or something, because I think even they were short on time. They just wanted me to quickly go ahead with a guesstimate. So here again, they asked me what would be the football viewership in India in 2020, and again, what are the factors that you would include. So in this case, again similar factors, people who coming from a rural or urban background, whether you're a guy or a girl, guys watch more football depending on your age. Then probably availability of mediums to watch football, say for example even TV or net these days. Again, reducing the numbers similarly. So it was quite repetitive, I would say, but I think because their procedure is such that they look to only confirm on the weaknesses, they probably decided to give me three estimates. So later on, after this whole procedure was over, I got an offer. So this was the whole procedure. Just to summarize, I think the way then later on I was told by one of the partners that what the procedure that they follow is based on the PSC, they prepare a profile for you, and they see which areas they feel you are weak in, and they give you cases, repeated cases in those areas to confirm that you're consistent even in your weak areas, you do well. So that is why probably I got three estimates. So in this part, I'm going to focus more on what are the good things that you can do in order to get a job offer from McKinsey in this case. So generally, all the consulting firms follow a very standard procedure for shortlisting of resumes, which is a first step. And so this includes all top consulting firms like McKinsey, BCG, Bain, Booz, all of them, Kearney. They all have the same procedure for shortlisting of resumes. They might have slight differences in what they look at, but generally two or three things that they look in very strongly are one is good academic record, so that they can ensure that a person is intellectually sound and has been doing what he's supposed to do on campus. They don't really want guys who are really lacking behind in academics, because that probably shows people that they have not been doing what they were supposed to do in the first place. So that is why they require a very balanced or at least some decent academic score. The second thing that they look for is a good leadership skills. So when I say leadership, that also combines in with team working and things like that, because in consulting they are usually working in teams. So if you've worked in teams, if you can show that you've been a good leader in the past through your resume, that really helps. And the higher the higher experience that you have, say for example if you're working in a position of responsibility or things like that, that is something that these firms value. The third thing, like I said, in case of McKinsey, will be if you have a startup or you are a co-founder or you're working on a startup idea or something like that, because that shows a very different aspect that you can create a business on your own. So that is something that they look for. And while the other firms are not so particular about this, but they look for experiences where you have shown excellence in general. So any one place where probably you have stood out from any of the others, it can be anything. It is open for all streams of engineering, and they don't really judge on those things. What they judge on is there's anything in life that you were passionate about and you've done very well in. So they usually consider it and strongly and let you go ahead with it. So basically these are the things that firms look for generally while in a resume. While preparing a resume, I would suggest people to so this was a procedure that I followed that helped a lot, that list down all the different things that you've done, and you need to kind of ensure that you cover all of these things which firms are looking for. So if possible, you should have a decent CPI, and you can include 1 or 2 academic points. However, that is it, because your CGPA is enough to show that you've done well. So there is no need to write an huge section on academics. Next thing that you can probably focus on is something in, say, if you've been a part of some leadership position or some team. And the third thing would be probably places where you've won, say, extracurricular activities, and probably an internship or a place where you had some corporate experience. So these 3 or 4 things are usually enough. And generally, on how to make a resume, you can refer to various books. So I used to refer to this book by Wetfeet. So it was some killer consulting resume, something like that. One of my friends had recommended it. Had some really concise points on what consulting looks for while you're making resumes. So I think that's it for the resume part. I think you can refer to the book for the nitty-gritties and keep in mind the general things while building a profile. Okay, so the next part was a problem-solving test. Now this part is usually very difficult to prepare for, because there is no material where you can, you get an exact idea of how a McKinsey problem-solving test is. they on their website in the apply section they have three sample PSPs. Those are your best source of practice problems that you get for the PSPs. They are typically again 26 question each, 1 hour. You need to time them, and they've in the first one they've made you do 10 questions in the format they believe will help you a lot. So every question they've solved in detail and let you know this is how you should proceed. So that helps. I mean, if you're going ahead with a PhD, at least that 3 question papers need to be done. Other question papers are very difficult to find. They are usually paid and they are at very high cost. So usually I or many of my friends didn't use it. I think that was enough. Being just logical and being just natural on that day helps. The next part is a case interview. Now this requires the most extensive preparation. So again, for all the firms, it's the same. So what happens is that the first thing that we need to do is prepare a case group. Now what a case group is that basically, since in consulting you cannot prepare all by yourself because you need an interviewer to change things or to give instructions dynamically. So you need to sit down and make groups at least in two or more, so that one of them can act as an interviewer and the other as a candidate. So typical role play, and the interviewer can play along with things and modify things to keep it as realistic as possible. So we used to have these buddies assigned who used to tell us where are the places from where you can probably practice cases, and otherwise there are these generic case books available online, or for different campuses have their own case books. So we used to refer to the Harvard one and the Stanford one. So there are cases you can one of the guys reads through it, the other guy acts as the interviewer because he knows all the stuff in the case, and he gives the case to someone else who typically solves the case, and that is how you go about it. So this is something that has to be done very extensively, and the more you do it, the better you are. It is something which requires a lot of, the more practice you have, more it helps. And so generally this is typically the process. What I would suggest is, in spite of all this, what really mattered on the interview day was not really just my practice on cases. What that helps is with your confidence. But if you're low on confidence that day, it really messes things up on that day. So I in fact faced this in my first interviews which I had with other firms. When I realized this, is that if you get nervous, then it's all you cannot concentrate. There's nothing you can do. The best that you should do that day is just remain calm, because even people who have prepared really well are not calm and they lose out because of that. So even if you know nothing, but if you're calm, it really helps. At least you can strike a conversation with a partner who is looking to have a colleague by his side, rather than at that point of time they want to connect with you. If you can connect with someone, then all these things are irrelevant at times. So I would suggest that the all in all, although you need to do all of this, but the most important thing that is there on interview days, you need to remain calm and try and connect with people, rather than push yourself in a position where you're nervous being an interviewee. So it's better to consider yourself a colleague while sitting for an interview, rather than consider yourself as a candidate who's going to be pressurized.